Billboard gives us the highest selling female artists of the 21st century so far, and I react to some albums that you guys have told me are 10 out of 10s. This is the Pop Pod. I am Pop Sam Cam, and it is Thursday, the 20th of March. Thank you guys so much once again for listening. I have been really enjoying doing this. I would love it if you would subscribe or follow if you're not already. And also leave a comment, drop a like. Let me know how much you love the podcast, or let me know how much you dislike it. That's fine as well. If you do really like it though, if you share this podcast and tag me, you can go in the running to win one of my Listening to Pop Classics t-shirts, and I will let you know who wins that early next week. But for now, let's get into the headlines. I can read your mind. Billboard has been counting down its best performing female artists of the 21st century. This comes off the back of their list last year, which put together the most important pop stars of the 21st century so far. That one was a little bit more subjective. This one is purely based on numbers. And here's who made up the top 8. We had Ariana Grande in 8. We had Pink in 7. Lady Gaga in 6. Katy Perry in 5th. Adele in 4th. Beyonce, who took out their list last year, in 3rd. Rihanna in 2. And then a massive jump to Taylor Swift, who is in 1st position. To mark this out for you, Rihanna is on 19 million points. She is in number 2. Then the jump to Taylor Swift is up to 37 million points. So she absolutely tore apart the competition. And I don't think that should come as a surprise to anybody. It's pretty clear that Taylor Swift is the highest selling artist of the 21st century so far. And you know what? I would be surprised if she loses that position. I know we've still got 75 years to go, but her performance has been so impressive that it's impossible to see her just stepping down from that, although we've got lots of time to go. As I said, we have a new Jack Harlow song coming on Friday. He's releasing a collaboration with Doja Cat. Doja Cat seems to be back in the spotlight at the moment. She collaborated with Lisa and also with Ray on Born Again. And now we're getting this song. Have a listen.
Clutching my hand, I'm adjusting my hand. She husky like mush in this bitch. You must be nuts rushing this.
I've been talking a lot about Kali Uchis's new record called Sincerely, which I spoke about earlier in the week. But now she's dropped a snippet of the first single, which is called Sunshine and Rain. Have a listen.
Just had it, epiphany. Sunshine and rain, the seasons change. We all need somebody that makes the earth feel heavenly. And I'll be that somebody.
Selena Gomez has an album coming with her fiance Benny Blanco on Friday, called I Said I Love You First. She revealed yesterday that there is a Charli XCX co-write on the album, and now she's given us a snippet. It's called Bluest Flame.
I just wanna go all night, I just wanna go insane. Touching the summer rain, hotter than the bluest flame, hotter than the bluest flame. Never get you out my mind, never get you out my brain. Wanna do it all again, hotter than the bluest flame, hotter than the bluest flame.
The IFPI, which puts together a report every year of how the music industry is tracking along, has revealed its 2024 statistics saying that global music industry revenues totaled $29.6 billion in 2024, which is the biggest year for music on record. This, perhaps unsurprising, given the success that streaming has had last year, but obviously basically since it was introduced, but it still blows my mind to me. Tell me why this is the biggest year for music on record, and yet every time I speak to a new musician, not even a new musician, musicians who have millions of streams, who are struggling to tour, who are struggling to pay healthcare. So tell me why then is there a CEO of a certain company who is walking away with more money for 12 months than any artist has ever earned from the platform? Streaming made up 69% of that $29.6 billion figure, which is just gigantic, but I feel like we need to have a little chat about where all this money is going, because musicians can't be struggling this hard while the industry is thriving. All right, let's go on to the chart update where we have a look at what Lady Gaga's Mayhem is going to do in its second week. It's currently on track to sell 84,000 units in the US, which reflects a 62% drop from the first week. But it's still good news because this would mark her strongest second week sales since the Fame Monster, which is hugely impressive for an artist who is currently on her 7th album. Chappell Roan's The Giver is also expected to debut within the top 10 of the Billboard Hot 100, currently challenging for a top 5 position after it stabilized on streaming and is doing very well in the US, indeed, still in the top 5 of the US Spotify charts. Finally, all 30 of Playboi Carti's songs on his new album Music are set to debut on the Billboard Hot 100. He would become only the 3rd artist ever to put more than 30 songs on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1 week. That list includes Taylor Swift and a country artist who starts with M that I will not mention the name of. All right, now we've got the business out of the way. Let's move on to the fun part of today's podcast, which is I asked you guys, what is an album that is a 10 out of 10, but people are too afraid to say it? And you came back with some very, very interesting albums. I am going to react to a few that I've picked out right now and tell you whether I think they are a 10 out of 10 album. Starting with Carly Rae Jepsen's Emotion. Emotion is a hugely underrated pop record, in my opinion. It's just pop perfection in every single way. The melodies hit, the production is just like glossy and 80s soaked and nostalgic and vibrant and buoyant. And Carly Rae Jepsen just kind of personifies the sort of like almost naive innocence that pop portrays at its very heart. And I think without Emotion, we don't get some of the really great 80s flavored pop work that we've gotten, you know, basically since Emotion was released, certainly since 1989 by Taylor Swift was released. So I would agree. I think this is a 10 out of 10 pop record. And I honestly don't think you're going to find many pop albums that are as good as this one. The next one is Justin Bieber's Purpose.
Can we keep each other company?
Purpose obviously came during his Imperial phase. There was almost nothing that Bieber could do wrong at this point. He had several huge hits. He had Sorry, What Do You Mean, Love Yourself, and it just kept going. Purpose is a funny album to me because it's kind of like him fully buying into the pop star thing. He's kind of resisted that pop star world at so many points throughout his career. Albums like Journals and Changes that really had him saying, no, I'm not a pop star, I'm a serious R&B artist. But Purpose was the time where he was like, yeah, fuck it, let's go for it. I want to be as big as I possibly can. And he delivered on that promise. I think Purpose is a fine pop record. I think it has some excellent, excellent singles and moments that I personally really love, like No Pressure, and also I'll Show You. But then there are some real clunkers on this record, like some of the ballads, Life Is Worth Living, Purpose, like, whoa, some of the lyrics, like on songs like Children, just do not do it for me. So I can't agree that this is a 10 out of 10, but I do think that it's a good record. The next one is Paris Hilton's Paris. This was such a controversial album when this came out because we were still at the point where everybody was very angry about people being famous without any talent. It was like the era of the reality TV show suddenly like making this big splash. I think it was even pre-Kardashians, but like certainly The Simple Life with Paris Hilton had been massive. And then she decides she wants to be a musician and it just boiled people's blood, which is so funny because who cares? And it's interesting to look back on this album in an era where almost everybody is famous for having no talent, myself included. And Paris just seems like not that big a deal anymore. Look, I can't say this album is a 10 out of 10, but it has some really good pop tracks on it. I think that Stars Are Blind has really gone the distance. I think that it is one of the like slinkiest and just like sultriest pop tracks around. And every time I hear it on, I still think that it hits in some kind of way. I weirdly really like her version of Do You Think I'm Sexy? I think that Screwed is like real disco bliss that could have been done better by somebody like Carly Rae Jepsen, but is also done well enough by her. And Nothing in This World, I think, is just like a 10 out of 10 pop song, to be honest. It just really hits. Unfortunately, it is produced by Dr. Redacted, but it just has this kind of like really poppy sort of like bounciness to it where it's not taking anything too seriously. And I guess that's what I like about this album. It's just fun and it's a little bit silly, and there was no need for everybody to be so annoyed about Paris Hilton releasing an album. The next one is Taylor Swift's Reputation.
Is it cool that I said all that? Is it chill that you're in my head? 'Cause I know that it's delicate.
This album came at a very difficult point in her career. The Taylor Swift and Kanye West feud was at absolute fever point. We obviously know now who comes out the victor in that situation, and it is not Kanye West. But Reputation, because of this, kind of gets underrated because there's this public backlash against her. Everybody wants to say the record's bad. She's also doing a little bit of a sonic shift up, experimenting with trap sounds and doing something much darker for her. And because of that, everybody is quick to just say Reputation is no good. But I think since Taylor Swift has obviously grown in popularity and people have seen that Reputation did not tear her career down, there's been this reappraisal for the record, and fairly so. But I think the problem was that Reputation wasn't marketed properly. It was marketed as this like dark revenge record, and much of that blame falls on the lead single, Look What You Made Me Do, which obviously buys very heavily into that feud sort of narrative. But at its heart, Reputation has this really beautiful kind of sentiment, which is finding love when you're at your absolute lowest. Like, she talks a lot about her reputation being so bad, and yet this person is still able to love her despite that, despite what the world is thinking, and despite really what she's thinking about herself. And that's when this record leaps. Like, you get the moments like Getaway Car, and also one of my favorites, which is Dancing with Our Hands Tied, and then that beautiful finale, New Year's Day, where the world is just shut out and she zeroes in on this one really intimate moment, which I think is so beautiful. And so when I think about Reputation as being quite a romantic record in spite of all the darkness around her, I think that it is a phenomenal album. I can't quite go 10 out of 10, but I can go close to it for sure. The next album is Guts by Olivia Rodrigo.
Sucker, fame fucker, bleeding me dry like a goddamn vampire.
I always see so much conversation about whether Guts was a disappointment after Sour, and for me, that is not the case at all. I think that Guts is an improvement in almost every single way. I think she saw that she was really in her element on Sour when she was in her rock bag on songs like Good For You and also Brutal. She took that from Sour and she kind of went fully into it on Guts and explored it more. And I think you just get some of the most raucous stuff from her. Like, the album's basically split half between those kind of rock tracks led by a song like Bad Idea, right? But then I think carried across best by a song like Ballad of a Homeschool Girl, which goes so hard. And then on the other side of it, you've got the ballads, which I think basically, bar perhaps Driver's License, kill Sour in every single way. There are so many beautiful moments. I mean, Vampire is so anthemic and huge. And then a song like The Grudge is just so dark and so potent. I think she just improved in every single way. And I love Guts. It was my album of 2023. So yeah, I'm going to co-sign this 10 out of 10 for Guts. The next one is Meghan Trainor's debut album called Tidal. Look, I don't think I could hate an album more, to be honest. It came at this point where we were starting to learn body positivity in the mainstream, and I absolutely think that is a good thing. But then, in order to sell that to us, she goes back to this kind of 50s doo-wop style. The 50s, I would say, not a decade that's known very much, well, in the mainstream, known hugely for its kind of like feminist agenda and body positivity. And that combination is just quite jarring, I feel. And it becomes even more jarring because then she starts to sell the ideologies of the 50s on a song like Dear Future Husband. And I'm like confused. I'm like, what is it you want? Because it feels like we're being totally emancipated and free on a song like All About That Bass. And then on Dear Future Husband, it's like so old school and traditional in its values. And I just don't think this album works at all. I'm sorry. I feel like she does have better material. Justice for Waves. Title doesn't do it for me. The next one is Miley Cyrus's Plastic Hearts.
Prisoner, prisoner, locked up, can't get you off my mind, off my mind.
This is an album that came, I think, in 2020, the COVID year. And it comes at a point in which Miley has finally gone full throttle into her rock persona that I feel like we always knew was there. When you think back to her earliest material, like See You Again, Seven Things, it's got a real rock vibe to it, but it's got a sheen that stops it from going like full on rock. And on Plastic Hearts, she finds this pocket and this era of music inspired by people like Joan Jett and Billy Idol, very 80s inspired, that just works so well for her and so well for the quality of her voice. I mean, Midnight Sky is one of the best songs she has ever released, but there are so many special moments on Plastic Hearts, I think. And I love how she kind of goes in between these two modes of the really like full on kind of growl in her voice, stadium rock moments. And then those kind of more synth-led moments like Never Be Me or even the closer Golden G-String. I just love this record. And it was so sad to me when she went back to something so much more middle of the road on Endless Summer Vacation and kind of sanded down all those edges that she had just exposed on Plastic Hearts. I think that this is Miley in her absolute like bag, just doing what she was born to do. And I really hope she captures some more of Plastic Hearts on the new album, Something Beautiful. Yes, this is a 10 record for me. The next one is Lady Gaga's Art Pop.
I wanna be that joy you want. I wanna be that joy you want.
I feel like all of these albums are albums that in some way have been underrated because of the circumstances that they were released in. And now we've had the time and the perspective to think about them some more. We're able to see them for what they really were. And Art Pop now, we see it as being one of the most ambitious pop records released, certainly in my time. This is an artist who's at the peak of her powers. She's had an album like Born This Way that sells over 1 million copies in its first week. And instead of just going for big pop anthems, she decides to make this absolute bonkers, throw everything at the wall, maximalist, postmodern art inspired album that really just leaves so many people scratching their heads. I mean, for the people who kind of bought in on a casual level with Lady Gaga because of songs like Edge of Glory and also something like Alejandro or even Just Dance, just the more straight down the line pop moments, I just would love to see their face listening to Swine for the first time, because that is the sound of an artist completely unchained and maybe a little unhinged. But I love hearing artists at this point in their career do something that's really surprising, that shows that they're not all about just bagging the hits and taking the cash. And Art Pop does exactly that. It's just like her going for it in every single way. And I think there are a couple of moments that maybe don't work, but for the most part, I find this album absolutely exhilarating. And even amongst the weirdness, you get some of her best melodic work on tracks like GUI and also Art Pop, and Applause, which I hated when it was released, I've really come around to as well. I think that it's a really intoxicating pop song. Yeah, I think of all the albums here, this one is the one that most should be reappraised as a 10 out of 10. I mean, I'm saying 10 out of 10, but if it falls in the 8-9 ballpark, I'm saying it's a 10 because it's a great record that you should listen to. I love art pop. The next one is Khalees's Flesh Tone.
I need you, never seem to, but I'm living proof.
I mean, if you've had an in-depth conversation with me about pop music, there is a chance that this record has been brought up. Khalees is such a genre chameleon in that she started obviously with the Neptunes, with that really sort of experimental alien-like R&B music. She's been able to do soul music as well on a record like Food. She's also done like harder hitting sort of hip hop work on an album like Khalees was here. And then she kind of becomes this almost like EDM champion for a little moment. She has Bounce with Calvin Harris, which is a huge record for her. And then she makes this album Flesh Tone with producers like Calvin Harris and David Guetta as well. And at the time, I feel like EDM music was just becoming so boring. Like it was just the same sort of structure over and over again. And instead of just going for that and just getting like 10 David Guetta songs that work up to some euphoric sort of drop, she makes Flesh Tone, which is just a lot more nuanced and a lot more, I don't know, she almost carves away at the EDM sound to reveal something far more beautiful. And I find this album just absolutely ethereal and euphoric at so many points. I think 4th of July is just an incredible song. And I think that something like Home also has this sort of movement and this frantic pace to it that just draws me in straight away. I find this album to be like really, it almost like caresses you in a way that EDM pop really never did. EDM pop was always about assault. And there's just so much more flavor and honey in this album. I find it incredible. I actually, if you ever listen to my Flop Stars podcast with Nick Kelly, we recorded an episode about Flesh Tone that we never released, but maybe I will go into the archives and pull it out because I love this album so much. The next one is The Weeknd's Dawn FM.
It's 5 a.m. my time again. I've soaken up the moon, can't sleep.
The second part in his trilogy that he just finished off with Hurry Up Tomorrow. Dawn FM was a weird one because it also came, I think, at the beginning of 2021. We were not really used to getting big pop records because everybody had made, well, not everybody, but a lot of artists had made these kind of more introspective lockdown albums like Folklore, Evermore. And then Dawn FM comes along. He's had one of the biggest songs of all time with Blinding Lights, and you expect that success to just keep going. And for some reason, it doesn't, because I can't even explain it to this day why Dawn FM was not really able to launch a real hit. And it's maybe just because of the weird sort of cultural times that we were in. But you've got a song like Less Than Zero on Dawn FM, which is one of the finest pop songs written in the last decade to my ear. I think Dawn FM is the best album that The Weeknd has ever made. I love how seamlessly it blends together, how it feels like a film, even though there is no visual to it, because of the way that Jim Carrey is kind of weaved through it, those incredible cinematic interludes, the sound that he finds himself in, which is 80s kind of prog electronica dance. And I think that's where he kind of shines. There are obviously a few like Michael Jackson isms in there, but ultimately he goes far more into an electronic sound that Michael Jackson ever really did in his career, and it just works so well for him. I think that this is one of those albums that I have to press play on, and then I have to listen right to the end because I want to get that full Dawn FM experience. Yeah, slap a 10 on this one. I love this one as well. And honestly, you guys have kind of killed it with your 10 out of 10 recommendations so far because they are all really good. And we're going to finish off with an absolute corker, which is Britney Spears' Blackout.
You want a piece of me? Bad media karma. Another day, another drama. Guess I can't see the harm in working and being a mama.
Again, we're going to an album that was really panned when it was released because Britney was in the midst of such a public, well, what was perceived to be a public meltdown. Her public persona couldn't really have been any lower at that point. And she comes through with Blackout, which kind of buys into everything that everyone was thinking of her at the time, which was that she was just like messy and burnt out and just a little bit like giving vibes of stumbling out of a club at 4 a.m. And Blackout goes, okay, I'll give you that sound. And you know what? That sounds freaking tight, because this is Danger in the studio putting together these hip hop urban sounds with these more dance inspired records. This is coming out, I think Blackout is at around the time that Lady Gaga emerges with this dance sound. I'm pretty sure Blackout is 2007. So it is the year, I think it's the year that The Fame by Lady Gaga is released. The Fame by Lady Gaga comes the year after. So Lady Gaga is kind of credited with this electro pop sound that emerges, but you've really got to start thinking about it being because of Blackout. You get a song like Give Me More, which just has such a grind to it. And then you've got a song like Break the Ice, which is like pulsating. And then Freak Show, which is like something that Charlie XCX could do on the Brat record. And I feel that way with Toy Soldier as well. It is such an interesting collision of styles and sounds. And at the center of it is this kind of tortured artist who is really going through it, but also really fighting against it on this record and doing something really interesting and following her artistic impulses and really finding some kind of liberation and emancipation through these sounds and this album, despite the fact that the public really has her image chained up at this point. I find Blackout such an exciting album to listen to, and I think it stands up today. It's one of the most like current sounding records that came out around this time because everything has aged so much, but not Blackout. This is definitely a 10 out of 10. And I feel like to study pop stars at their greatest is when you study them when their backs are against the wall and you see what they do. And she made a record like this, and I think that it's just such an interesting one. This is a really fun segment to do. I feel like we should keep going with this. You guys should keep sending me albums that you think are a 10 out of 10. You can DM them to me or whatever, or I'll put up a thread on Threads, or I'll ask you on Instagram story, and we can just keep going with this, and we'll do a couple more in a week or so. But that was really fun to do. If you agree with me, if you disagree with me, and you're listening to this on Spotify, you can comment below and let's talk about these albums even further, because they all deserve conversation in one way or another. Tomorrow, it will be New Music Friday, so we'll go through all the new music that I've heard from the week. We'll do a little bop or flop, and then we'll talk about what is going to come next week for this podcast. But I really appreciate your time listening to this. Like, subscribe, whatever you do. I'm not good at this kind of self-promotion shit, but I really, really appreciate your support. I will see you tomorrow. Thank you for listening to the Pop Pop.